I thought being maid of honor meant my sister finally valued me. Then I heard her whisper, just keep her feeling special. She wanted my money. I gave her consequences instead. I was still connected to the video call when she said it. Mum and I had been talking for almost an hour when someone buzzed my flat. I muted my microphone, switched off my camera, and went to collect a parcel from downstairs. By the time I returned, Mum had carried her laptop into the kitchen. I was about to turn my camera back on when my younger sister walked into the room. Ruby dropped her handbag onto a chair and opened the refrigerator. "Were you talking to Andrea?" she asked. Mum glanced at the laptop. My screen was dark, and she must have assumed I had disconnected. She had to go. I reached for the unmute button. Then Ruby said, "Nicole called me again." Something about her tone made me stop. Mum leaned against the kitchen counter. How is she feeling? Still exhausted. The pregnancy is affecting her more than she expected. She cannot help that. I know. I'm not blaming her. Ruby twisted the cap off a bottle of water. I just wish she had backed out before I asked her to be maid of honor. My hand froze above the keyboard. Ruby had asked me to be her maid of honor nearly 5 months earlier. She had cried while asking. We had been sitting across from each other in a restaurant when she reached for my hands and told me she couldn't imagine getting married without me beside her. Apparently, Nicole had been her first choice. That alone would have hurt, but I could have understood it. Nicole had been Ruby's closest friend for years. What I couldn't understand was why Ruby had made the moment feel so sincere. Mum lowered her voice. At least Andrea agreed. Ruby laughed softly. She was always going to agree. Mum frowned. You shouldn't say it like that. Why not? It's true. Ruby leaned back against the counter. She already paid for the engagement party. She has booked half the maid of honor things. She'll keep going as long as she thinks I need her. Mum looked toward the laptop. For one hopeful second, I thought she might defend me. Instead, she said, you should still be careful. Andrea has started asking about the money. Ruby rolled her eyes. She asks, but she never pushes. That could change. It won't. Ruby lowered her voice, as though she were sharing a clever trick. Just keep her feeling special. That's all it takes. My chest tightened. Mum gave her a warning look. You are pushing your luck. I know my sister. Ruby smiled. If I make her feel important, she'll pay for almost anything. Mum didn't tell her that manipulating me was wrong. She didn't remind Ruby that I was her sister, not a convenient source of money. She only said, do not upset her before the wedding. Before the wedding. As though Ruby's behavior would be acceptable once the photographs had been taken and the final bills were paid. They moved on to discussing flowers. Ruby complained that the photographer wanted the remaining balance earlier than expected. Mum assured her they would find a way to manage it. I knew what that meant. They would call me. They always did. When Ruby had been short on rent, I helped her. When Mum faced an unexpected expense, I transferred money before she finished explaining. When Dad underestimated the cost of a family gathering, I covered the difference and acted as if it didn't matter. I had spent years making sure the people around me never felt the full impact of their own poor planning. They had mistaken that habit for an endless obligation. I remained silent for another 30 seconds, hoping Ruby might say something that changed the meaning of what I had heard. She didn't. Then she turned toward the laptop. Are you sure she left? Mum stepped closer to the screen. Her face changed. Andrea? I ended the call. My hand was trembling. For several minutes, I stayed on the sofa with the laptop open in front of me. Ruby's words kept replaying. Just keep her feeling special. Suddenly, every compliment she had given me during the previous 6 months felt calculated. The hugs. The grateful messages. The way she kept saying she didn't know what she would do without me. I had believed she was recognizing my support. She had been maintaining it. 6 months earlier, Ruby had called me in tears. She and Jeremy had recently become engaged, and they wanted to hold a proper engagement party. Ruby insisted it wouldn't be extravagant. They only wanted a pleasant venue, food, decorations, and enough room for their families and friends. Then the costs began climbing. The venue required a large deposit. The caterer wanted payment in advance. The decorations Ruby had chosen were more expensive than expected. By the time she called me, she said they were considering canceling the whole event. I feel ridiculous, she told me. Everyone is excited, and now we can't afford it. I asked how much they needed. She hesitated before answering. About £4,000. The final amount came to £4,200. I paid the venue, caterer, and decorator directly. Ruby promised to repay me in monthly installments. She put it in writing more than once. This is a loan. I promise. I can start paying you after the party. I don't expect you to fund my life. I had replied with a heart. The engagement party took place at a country hotel outside Reading. Ruby looked genuinely happy that evening. She hugged me in front of everyone and whispered, "You saved this for us." Jeremy's mother, Angela, thanked me repeatedly. Jeremy's father raised his glass toward me during one of the speeches. One of Jeremy's cousins joked that Ruby was fortunate to have such a generous sister. I laughed because I assumed they all knew the money was a loan. Ruby made no repayments afterward. Every time I asked, she had another explanation. The wedding deposit had been higher than expected. Their car needed repairs. Another bill had appeared. It had been a difficult month. I kept giving her more time. Then, 2 weeks after the engagement party, she asked me to be maid of honor. I had taken the timing as proof that helping her had brought us closer. Now it looked more like a way to keep me involved. My phone began vibrating less than a minute after I ended the call. Ruby called once. Then again. Then a third time. I didn't answer. Mom tried twice. Messages followed. Ruby, did the call disconnect? Ruby, Mom thinks you might have still been there. Ruby, please call me. A few minutes later, another message appeared. Ruby, do not turn this into something it wasn't. She didn't know exactly what I had heard, but she was already preparing to tell me I had misunderstood it. I switched my phone off. The dark green maid of honor dress was hanging from my wardrobe door. At the fitting, Ruby had told me it looked perfect. I had been embarrassingly moved by that small compliment. Now I wondered whether it had been deliberate. I opened the wedding spreadsheet on my laptop. Ruby had asked me to manage it because I was better at organizing things. Several upcoming expenses had been assigned to me. The hen dinner deposit. Transportation for the bridal party. Hotel room holds. Welcome bags. Last-minute decorations. Ruby had introduced each expense separately, making every request sound small. Together, they added up to nearly another £2,000. I hadn't paid all of it yet. That realization gave me the first sense of control I had felt since ending the call. The next morning, my Aunt Judy contacted me. She was Mom's older sister and one of the few relatives who sometimes questioned the way my family handled things. "Are you all right?" she asked. I hadn't told her anything. "What did Mom say?" Judy paused. "She said there had been a misunderstanding and that you were refusing to speak to anyone." "Did she tell you what I heard?" "No." So I explained everything. I told her about Nicole. I repeated Ruby's comments about making me feel important. I told her Mom had been standing there for the entire conversation. When I finished, Judy remained quiet. Then she said, "There is something else you should know." My stomach tightened. At the engagement party, Jeremy's family believed you had paid for everything as a gift. What? Ruby told them you volunteered. I stood up without realizing it. She told them the £4,200 was a gift? That is what they understood. Several moments from the party suddenly made sense. Angela's repeated gratitude. Jeremy's father raising his glass. The cousin praising my generosity. They hadn't known Ruby was supposed to repay me. Ruby had rewritten the arrangement before the party even began. Why didn't anyone mention it to me? I assumed you knew what she had told them, Judy said. After the call ended, I searched through every message Ruby and I had exchanged about the engagement party. I found 3 clear acknowledgments that the money was a loan. One confirmed the full amount. Another suggested monthly payments. The third promised repayment after the party. I took screenshots and saved them in several places. Only then did I call Ruby. She answered immediately. "Thank God," she said. "Andrea, Mom, and I have been worried. You told Jeremy's family the engagement party was a gift." Silence. It lasted only a second, but I heard it. "I don't know exactly what they think. You told them I volunteered to pay. I might have simplified it." "You lied." Ruby exhaled sharply. "Can you stop using dramatic words? You borrowed £4,200 from me and told everyone it was a gift. You offered to help. I agreed to lend you the money. And I said I would repay you. You haven't paid me anything. I am trying to organize a wedding. That does not erase the debt." Her tone changed. "So this is really about money?" "No. It became about money when you told Mom I would keep paying if you made me feel important." Ruby stopped speaking. I repeated the conversation word for word. Nicole was supposed to be your maid of honor. You had to ask me instead. I had already paid for everything, so I would keep going along with whatever you needed. Andrea. Then you said, just keep her feeling special. She remained silent. You told Mum that if you made me feel important, I would pay for almost anything. Her breathing changed. She didn't deny it. She began to cry. Not quiet tears. Loud, gasping sobs that immediately made me feel as though I had attacked her. How could you listen to a private conversation? I was still on a call with Mum. You should have said something. I froze. So you sat there spying on us? I didn't know you were about to discuss me. This is such a violation. For one dangerous moment, I almost apologized. The instinct was automatic. Then I remembered her laughter. I'm stepping down as maid of honor. Ruby stopped crying. What? I'm not doing it. The wedding is in 3 weeks. I know. You cannot leave me without a maid of honor 3 weeks before my wedding. You wanted Nicole. Nicole cannot manage everything. She is exhausted. Then ask someone else. You have already booked things. I will cancel anything under my name. You can't do that. I can remove myself from arrangements I'm financially responsible for. You're going to ruin the wedding. I'm not touching your venue, caterer, or ceremony. I am withdrawing from my own bookings. What am I supposed to tell everyone? The truth. Ruby's voice sharpened. You have always been jealous of me. The accusation was so unexpected that I laughed. Jealous of what? My wedding. My relationship. Everyone paying attention to me. I paid for your engagement party because I was happy for you. That doesn't mean you weren't secretly resentful. I wasn't resentful until I heard you explaining how to manage me. I was frustrated. You weren't complaining about something I had done. You were describing how to keep me useful. Ruby started crying again. You're ruining the happiest time of my life. No. I'm refusing to finance it. I ended the call. Mum rang immediately. I answered because part of me still hoped she would admit Ruby had crossed a line. Instead, she said, "What have you done?" I stepped down. You cannot abandon your sister weeks before her wedding. I overheard her admitting she was using me. She was venting. She also lied about the loan. She was embarrassed. She owes me £4,200. You know she cannot afford to repay that right now. Then why are she and Jeremy holding a wedding they cannot afford? Mum went quiet. Dad said something in the background. Then she replied, families help each other. Does Ruby help me? This is not about keeping score. It never is when I'm the one giving. You have always made things more difficult than they need to be. That sentence hurt more than Ruby's laughter. I had heard different versions of it all my life. Why are you making this difficult? Why can't you let it go? Why can't you be the mature one? Why can't you understand what your sister is going through? It had always sounded like advice. Now I understood it as an instruction to remain convenient. I'm not attending the wedding, I said. Mum gasped. Do not say something you'll regret. I've never been more certain. You will destroy your relationship with your sister. I think Ruby already did that. I ended the call. That was when I finally cried. Not because I regretted withdrawing. I cried because my family understood what Ruby had done and still expected me to accept it. Ruby needed help. Mum defended her. Dad avoided conflict. I made the problem disappear. The moment I refused to do that, everyone treated me as though I had created it. Over the next 2 days, I canceled every wedding-related arrangement held under my name. I released the hotel rooms reserved on my card. I canceled the private room for the hen dinner. I withdrew from the bridal party transportation booking. I returned unopened decorations and supplies. Some deposits were refunded. Others were lost. Those cancellations had nothing to do with the £4,200 loan. That money had paid for the engagement party, which had already taken place. Ruby still owed the entire amount. I did not interfere with the wedding venue. I didn't contact the caterer or photographer. Anything Ruby and Jeremy had arranged themselves remained untouched. I simply removed my name, money, and responsibility from plans I was no longer part of. Ruby told the family I had sabotaged her wedding. The group chat quickly filled with criticism. A cousin asked why I couldn't wait until after the ceremony to deal with my feelings. An uncle reminded me that sisters should forgive each other. Someone else said Ruby was under pressure and had probably said something she didn't mean. Dad eventually sent one message. Think carefully about the consequences. Nobody had offered Ruby the same warning when she borrowed my money or lied to Jeremy's family. Apparently, consequences were only considered cruel when she experienced them. I muted the group chat. Then I wrote a detailed email to Mum and Dad. I included the date Ruby asked for the loan, the full amount, and the messages confirming repayment. I explained what I had overheard and what Ruby had told Jeremy's family. I listed the wedding bookings I had canceled and made it clear that none of them affected the engagement party debt. I ended the email by saying that I loved them but would not apologize for removing myself from a situation where I was being used. I read it several times before sending it. I removed any sentence they might dismiss as overly emotional. Neither of them replied. That evening, Ruby sent me a message. You have made your point. Can you stop now? I replied with one question. When will you repay the £4,200? She didn't answer. The following afternoon, Jeremy's mother called me. Hello, Andrea. It's Angela. Her voice was cautious. I hope I'm not interfering. You aren't. I heard you are no longer attending the wedding. That's correct. Ruby said there was a disagreement about the engagement party. I waited. She told us you paid for it as an early wedding gift. It was a loan. Angela went quiet. Are you certain? I paid the vendors directly. Ruby confirmed in writing that she would repay me. I had no idea. I know. Does Jeremy know? I don't think he does. Angela thanked me for answering and ended the call. 10 minutes later, Ruby rang. I let it go to voicemail. Then she sent a message. Why are you involving Angela? I replied. She called me. Ruby answered almost immediately. You are trying to turn Jeremy's family against me. I didn't respond. That night, I considered contacting Jeremy directly. I wasn't trying to end their relationship. I didn't expect him to choose my side. But he was about to marry someone who had lied to his family about thousands of pounds. If I stayed silent, Ruby would continue using that silence as proof that her version was true. The next morning, I sent Jeremy a short message. I told him the engagement party had been funded through a £4,200 loan, not a gift. I attached 3 screenshots showing Ruby acknowledging the debt. I also told him what I had overheard during the video call. I finished with, I am not asking you to choose sides or change your plans. Your family was given an inaccurate version of what happened, and I did not want my silence to support it. Jeremy replied almost an hour later. I appreciate you telling me. I didn't know about the loan. That was all. There was no dramatic confrontation and no announcement that the wedding was canceled. He had the information. Whatever he decided to tolerate was his choice. Ruby called repeatedly that evening. I didn't answer. Her final voicemail lasted almost 4 minutes. She accused me of trying to destroy her relationship. She said Jeremy was asking questions she didn't want to answer. She said Angela was treating her differently. She said Mum was barely sleeping. Then she said, you already abandoned me as my maid of honor. What else do you want? She still thought this was about punishing her. I deleted the voicemail. For days before the wedding, £2,000 appeared in my account. There was no message attached. Ruby had finally repaid almost half of what she owed. I sent her a written request for the remaining £2,200 and gave her 30 days. I stated that if she missed the deadline without arranging a repayment plan, I would begin a small claims case. That finally produced a response. You would take your own sister to court? I wrote back. I would take anyone to court who borrowed £4,200 and refused to repay it. Ruby sent a much longer message. She said I had ruined the weeks leading up to her wedding. Mum was devastated. Dad could barely speak about me. Jeremy's parents no longer trusted her. Nicole had agreed to stand beside her during the ceremony, even though she was too exhausted to take over the planning and physical responsibilities. Ruby described every consequence she was facing. She never acknowledged what had caused them. I didn't reply. On the morning of the wedding, I woke before my alarm. For a few seconds, I forgot what day it was. Then my phone lit up with a message from Mum. There is still time to make this right. I read it twice. She wasn't asking me to come so we could talk. She wanted me to put on the dress, stand beside Ruby, smile for the photographs, and protect the family from embarrassment. The maid of honor dress was still inside my wardrobe. I took it out and held it against myself in front of the mirror. I imagined arriving at the venue. Ruby would cry and hug me. Mum would tell everyone we had resolved the disagreement. Dad would look relieved. Relatives would praise me for being the bigger person. The photographs would show a united family. They wouldn't show the debt or explain why I had nearly withdrawn. My presence would allow everyone to pretend nothing serious had happened. I folded the dress and placed it inside a storage bag. Then I picked up the suitcase beside my front door. My friend Beth had suggested the trip after I told her what happened. "You were prepared to spend more money on that wedding," she said. "Spend some of it on yourself instead." At first, the idea felt selfish. That bothered me. A weekend alone felt selfish, while paying thousands for someone who mocked me had felt normal. I had booked a train to Bath. As I walked toward the station, my phone began vibrating. Mum called. Ruby called. Dad called for the first time since the argument. I didn't answer. At the station, Ruby sent a message. "Please don't do this to me today." She still framed my absence as something I was doing to her. I turned off my phone. The train pulled away shortly afterward. I sat beside the window with a coffee cooling between my hands. For the first part of the journey, I expected guilt to overwhelm me. I imagined Ruby preparing without me. I pictured Mum answering questions from relatives. I thought about Nicole standing beside Ruby despite not being able to handle the full maid of honor duties. Then I asked myself what would change if I went back. Ruby would still have used me. Mum would still have defended her. Dad would still confuse silence with peace. The only difference was that everyone else would feel more comfortable. I had spent enough years paying that price. As the countryside passed outside the window, I allowed their discomfort to remain theirs. When I arrived in Bath, I checked into a small hotel and left my suitcase in the room. Then I walked without a plan. Nobody around me knew who I was. No one needed money, advice, or help covering a mistake. I spent nearly 2 hours inside a bookshop and bought 3 novels that barely fit inside my bag. Afterward, I found a quiet cafe and ordered tea. At around the time Ruby would have been walking down the aisle, I was sitting beside a window reading the first chapter of a book. I wondered whether she looked happy. I wondered whether Jeremy believed her explanation. I wondered what Mum was telling people about my absence. For once, I allowed those questions to remain unanswered. That evening, I ate dinner alone. The woman serving me asked whether I was waiting for someone. "No," I said. "It's just me." The answer didn't sound lonely. It sounded complete. I ordered dessert and ate it slowly. Back at the hotel, I switched on my phone. There were 37 messages. The wedding had happened. Ruby and Jeremy were married. Nicole had stood beside Ruby during the ceremony, but had not taken over the planning duties. Mum had sent a family photograph. There was a visible space where I would have been standing. Her caption read, "This should have included you." I looked at the picture. Ruby was smiling. Jeremy's expression was difficult to read. Dad looked tired. Mum looked angry. For a moment, grief hit me hard enough that I had to sit down. I wasn't grieving the ceremony. I was grieving the family I had spent years hoping we might become. I had always believed that if I helped enough and forgave quickly enough, they would eventually value me for more than what I provided. The photograph made something painfully clear. There had always been a place for me in the family, but only when I agreed to occupy the role they had chosen. I closed the message and went to sleep. I slept for 8 uninterrupted hours. When I returned home 2 days later, Mum called. This time I answered. She didn't ask about the trip. She said, "I hope you are satisfied." With what? Everyone asked where you were. What did you tell them? That you chose not to attend. That's true. You embarrassed your sister. I didn't speak to anyone at the wedding. Your absence spoke for you. I placed my suitcase beside the door. Maybe people asked questions because I was expected to be there. You always make everything difficult. For years, that sentence had made me feel ashamed. Now I understood that I became difficult whenever I stopped cooperating. Dad took the phone. "She is your sister," he said. "I know. You only get one family. I know. You could have dealt with this after the wedding. Why should the wedding protect Ruby from consequences? She made a mistake. She borrowed £4,200, lied about it, and admitted she was manipulating me. She was under pressure. If I had done the same thing to Ruby, would you expect her to stand beside me and smile?" Dad didn't answer. Eventually, he said that would be different. How? He had no explanation. Mum took the phone again. "We are not going to argue in circles." "No, we aren't." "So what happens now?" It was the first useful question either of them had asked. "I need space." "For how long?" "I don't know." "You are punishing us." "I'm protecting myself." "From your own family?" "Yes." Mum inhaled sharply. I told them I loved them and ended the call. During the following weeks, I kept contact limited. Mum alternated between anger and forced normality. One day, she accused me of tearing the family apart. The next day, she sent a photograph of something she had cooked and behaved as though nothing had happened. Dad sent brief messages about ordinary things. Ruby remained silent. 5 days before the repayment deadline, she transferred £1,000. 2 days before the deadline, the final £1,200 appeared. She had repaid the full £4,200. I checked the total 3 times. I had expected the moment to feel triumphant. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table and felt quiet. The money mattered, and I would have taken Ruby to court if she had refused to pay. But repayment did not repair the relationship. It simply removed the final financial connection between us. Ruby messaged me that evening. "There. You got what you wanted." I looked at the words for a long time before replying. I wanted a sister who didn't treat kindness like weakness. The money was only what you owed me. She never answered. Several months have passed. Ruby and I still haven't spoken. Mum says I am holding a grudge. Dad says time will fix everything. Maybe time can soften anger, but it cannot repair a relationship that nobody is willing to examine. I started therapy. During one of my first sessions, I described the loan, the video call, the wedding, and my parents' reaction. Then I spent several minutes explaining everyone else's behavior. Mum had always depended on me. Dad hated confrontation. Ruby had been protected for so long that she probably didn't understand how cruel she sounded. My therapist, Kelly, listened until I ran out of explanations. Then she asked, "When does anyone in your family make room for your feelings?" I couldn't answer. I had become so skilled at understanding everyone else that I had never noticed how rarely anyone tried to understand me. I still have the train ticket from Bath. It is tucked inside the first book I bought that weekend. Whenever I find it, I remember sitting beside the train window and realizing that I was allowed to let other people solve the problems they created. I don't know whether Ruby and I will ever have a relationship again. Part of me still misses her. More accurately, I miss the sister I believed she could be. I miss the version of our relationship where asking me to be maid of honor meant she genuinely wanted me beside her. Maybe that version never existed. My parents still believe I went too far. They say I should have attended the wedding and dealt with the money afterward. They believe one overheard conversation destroyed the family. I see it differently. The conversation didn't destroy anything. It revealed what had already been there. Ruby believed making me feel important would keep me useful. Instead, she taught me that I didn't need anyone else to decide my worth. So was I wrong for skipping my sister's wedding and threatening court until she repaid the loan, or did I finally give my family the consequences they had spent years avoiding?